Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to get an update from what's going on up the hill, on Beacon Hill. And as much as a lot of people say what happens at the state level doesn't affect us, if you look at the last few years, what our representatives have brought us have been critical. Our Chapter 70 money going up 7 million a year, and our general funds going up. It has saved our budgets and our programs. But let's start with an introduction.
Al, good evening. Brian Murray, State Representative, 10th Worcester District, which consists of the towns of Milford, Hopedale, and Mendon.
So you traded away that one street in Bellingham for a future draft pick?
Medway.
Oh, Medway?
Medway, yeah. That's, I guess the population grew, so much in the other towns because we're limited to only having about 40,000 people in our district. So I had to give up
I always
precinct one.
thought it was a great idea. I wanted to trade away a street in Milford and have two representatives.
Yeah.
Because you had said it a long time ago that you can't represent one district in a town.
Right. Yeah, no, there's 4 precincts in Medway, and Representative Jeff Roy has 3 of them, and I had 1. But yeah, you're right. We worked together on all of the issues for the town, and I mean, I enjoyed my time there. Medway's a wonderful community, very well run town government, very good school system, a lot of good things happening there. So I enjoyed representing Medway.
So it seems like, and I don't mean it as a slam, but it's the end of the year, so now everything has to come together.
Well, so you got to keep in perspective the legislative calendar, which is an overlay upon the fiscal year. So you're right in the sense that the fiscal year is coming to a close on June 30th. However, the legislative session is a 2-year calendar. So we started in January of this year, so that'd be January 2023. The legislative term runs entirely through 2023 and then through July 31st of 2024. And on July 31st, that's when you can no longer have formal sessions. So anything that might be controversial or would require, input, from different sides, generally that has to get done before July 31st of 2024. You can still get
The informal,
informal. In fact, last session, I used that time period from August to December and got a number of local bills through. I think we got about 8 or 10 of them through during that time period.
And we appreciated every one of them.
So those kinds of bills, you can, push them
So
through.
realistically, you're kind of hitting the middle of this legislative
Oh,
session.
absolutely. Oh, I would say this is still probably the front third. So, what's happening now that we got the budget, out of the way from the legislature's perspective, now, the Senate and the House version needs to be reconciled to then send on to the governor. But the focus now is on the committee hearing. So there are a number of committees. Any bill that gets filed gets sent off to a committee, and if it's a timely filed bill, then it is entitled to a public hearing. So those hearings now are happening in earnest. There were a number of them today in the State House, a number of them tomorrow, Wednesday, and that's going to continue probably, I would say, maybe through July. I would anticipate that things would slow down a bit in August, and then come September, you'll hit the ground running again with more committee hearings on bills that get back. Because over 7,000 bills get submitted.
7,000?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even over
On
a 2-year
average.
period, that's 10 a day.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think for a second because last year I was vice chair on public health, and we turned out well over 450 bills from our committee. This term, I'm vice chair on transportation. We have a hearing tomorrow. I'm not aware of a total number of bills we have for transportation, probably a bit less numerically, but probably more substantively, qualitatively, because there were so many issues with the T and road structure and that kind of stuff.
Now, there's always confusion. We heard the budget passed the Senate, the budget passed the House,
Yep.
governor had her 2 cents worth. What happens now?
Well, so as you know, the budget process kicks off usually that first day in March, and the governor files H1, which is the governor's budget. Then the Joint Ways and Means Committee has a series of public hearings, and I'm on that committee. And we went all across the state, out to UMass Amherst, Worcester. I'm trying to think where it was down in the New Bedford Fall River area. But generally, they try to spread the public hearings out pretty much throughout the state. Once those conclude, then the House comes forward with our budget. So it gets announced the 2 weeks before school vacation. We have 3 days to file our budget, the week before school vacation, I'm sorry. We have 3 days to file, Wednesday, Thursday, we have 3 days to file our budget amendments. And this past session, there were over 1,500 amendments that were filed to the budget. During the week of April vacation, the Ways and Means Committee assembles the entire budget. And then when we come back the last week in April, we hit the ground running for pretty much all day, all night sessions to try to resolve the House budget. We got it done this year in 3 days. I think the latest we were there was only about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Past years, it's been past midnight, that kind of stuff. So that's a long day and a long night. So we finished the budget at that time by the end of April. And then in May, the Senate does their similar type process. They finish their budget, I think right around Memorial Day or after Memorial Day. So now a conference committee gets appointed, which consists of 3 members of the House of Representatives and 3 senators, and they will meet to reconcile the 2 budgets so that one single budget gets passed by both houses and then goes off to the governor. The governor then has an opportunity to either approve it, veto it, or any combination. And in the years I've been on, there have been a number of different scenarios. One time, Governor Baker sent back, oh my God, hundreds of vetoes. And then most recently, I think it might have been less than 10. So it's tough to gauge. I'm not sure where Governor Healy's going to be on that. But then it comes back to both chambers, and then we deal with the vetoes. And then that gets sent on to the governor.
You only have a couple weeks to go, right?
Well, it should be done by June 30th, but it never is. So it'll go into July, I think. So all of that simply means is you file what we call a 1/12. So there would be a bill which would cover costs for the month of July.
Is that like a continuing?
It's be a supplemental budget. So you pass a 1/12. So then that keeps your government operating obviously through July while you continue that process.
Now, you're dealing with a new governor.
Yes.
Initially, there was a 1-month delay out of, I guess, professional courtesy to let the new administration come up with their budget. How is it dealing with the new governor?
Well, no, she got her budget in on time, March 1st. We got House 1. I mean, she got it submitted. I think she's going to be an excellent governor. I really do. She was just out to Milford recently to visit Riverside for the Community Behavioral Health Center, which is only one of 29 in the state, and it's something that the Commonwealth feels very strongly about in terms of confronting behavioral health issues comprehensively in the community. And Riverside has been a great provider for a number of years, very qualified. very compassionate, and they got selected to be one of the 29. And actually, by the governor coming out here and the Secretary of Health and Human Resources came out previously, Kate Walsh. She went back to tell the governor, you've got to come out to Milford and see how they're doing at Riverside. This is the way we want this grant program to operate. And she came out and she toured the facility and met with the staff and very, very impressed. So, I mean, she's interested in a lot of different things, and she's interested in things at the ground level. So I think that she's going to be an excellent governor. I really do.
Well, it's encouraging that she comes outside of 128,
Absolutely.
because we've had governors who kind of thought the state ended at 128,
Right, right, right.
except when it came down to collecting taxes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, in April, the media started playing up this huge drop in revenue and the world was going to end. And
Yeah, so revenue gets monitored very closely on a month-to-month basis. Some months are better than others, or I should say some months are more important than others in terms of, when folks pay their quarterlies, that kind of stuff. So April obviously is a huge month. That's when, taxes are due. And the revenue that was collected was well below what was anticipated. So we went from about a $700-800 million surplus from what was projected at the beginning of fiscal 23 to about a $700 to $800 million deficit in 1 month. It was a flip of about $1.5 billion. So that was very concerning. I think there were a little bit of warning signs. January had been down. February and March rebounded a bit. So April was concerning. Probably has put a little pause on the tax reform legislation that both we passed in the House and the Senate just recently passed. But again, revenue projections are monitored very closely, not only the beginning, mid-month, and of course the end of the month. So May came in, and May exceeded revenue expectations by, I want to say, about 200 million, something like that. So while it's still projected lower than the revenues that we thought, I think there's a fairly good comfort zone for June. And then, of course, we did have a lot of surplus funds, which we had targeted to the rainy day, the state stabilization fund, the rainy day fund, and other sources. So I think we're going to be fine for FY23. I think the question arises as to how far to go with the tax reform legislation that, again, both chambers have passed and that the governor is committed to.
but why is that such a surprise? If you look at the market, if you look at your own portfolio, and you start seeing the numbers slow down or go negative, why is it such a surprise that there's not going to be a lot of capital gains to pay?
Right.
You know, I mean, like you say, the indications are there when the economy's hot and flying. Well, yeah, we're going to have a few extra pennies here and there to kick in taxes, but the last couple of years it's been quiet.
It has, and I mean, revenue, surprisingly, the last couple of years has been very good, on the government side. And, we've been able to, do some programs that, might not otherwise have been able to do, i.e. the entire school free lunch program, which is probably about a $200 million program. So there's been a number of programs like that that we've been able to implement simply because of the revenue stream that we've had.
But is there much pushback on this free lunch program?
There's pushback on everything now. For every one person that's in favor of something, there's probably one or two that are against it for whatever reason. We call them stakeholders. Everybody's a stakeholder if they've got an interest in it. And when you try to put together any type of bill, you've got a variety of interests that you need to try to accommodate.
But it just seems like, how can you look at the data that says a lot of the kids, in Milford, over 50% of our high school kids qualify for free lunch.
Oh, sure. Well, I was going to say even over 60%.
Maybe it's over 60, but
Yeah, but it's yeah.
that's $34,000 a year for a family of four. Some of those kids, the only good meal they get is what they get from school.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, I was tickled pink when I found out that Carla and crew over the summer rallied the troops and still had a free lunch program
Yeah,
for kids.
sure. And she, by the way, and her staff were very helpful to me because I got feedback from them as to how the program's working at the ground level, and I wanted to get a sense as to whether or not this made sense or not. And she was very, very helpful in getting me information, which made it easier on my end to help with that decision-making process.
Well, I mean, even for the small number of kids who don't need help, the fact that you're not calling out the kids who do seems a worthwhile. I mean, 200 million is a ton of money, but it's for our kids.
Oh, I know. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a great program, and like I said, it's something that I've always obviously supported. But today's world, there are folks that don't.
Is it just economic reasons, or?
Well, I mean, I think the mood, of the country, I don't think it's as bad in Massachusetts as it is other places. But it seems to me, and you've been around, an awful long time too, you just don't see as much of that sense of community as you used to. And it just seems like folks are kind of more interested in their own self-needs. And if they don't have kids in school, or, if they come from a certain part of the state where it might not be something that can help their community, they might not have interest in going after a program like that. They might have interest that those funds could be used elsewhere. I'm not saying we got a tremendous amount of opposition on
No,
this, but
you do get some.
it wasn't a slam dunk, let me put it that way.
It always amazes me because young Joe Kennedy, when he came on and said he has to help out with the farmers because he needs the square state representatives to back him. And then I think about Western Mass where their broadband was a big thing.
Yes.
When was the last time your kids yelled at you for broadband here? But you got to feel for the people who don't have it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a major service, So, I mean, that's that same dynamic, right? So it's not the same scope, and obviously the issues are different than what Joe Kennedy was talking to you about. But I mean, that same dynamic holds true, really at the state level and even at the local level. I mean, you're not going to be able to get anything done unless you can work with someone else. And of course, someone else may have different needs. So you've got to try to help them out to get what they need, to get the help that they can give you for what you need. And that's true even at the local level. I mean, the Parks Department has to work with the Highway Department, and the police have to work with the fire. So it's the same dynamic, even though the issues and obviously the folks are different.
Yeah, they're on a micro scale, but it's the same horse trading.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I may not care about a Frisbee golf field, but there are a lot of people who do.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, originally, if you remember the trail, when Reno first came to us asking for money for the trail, people were saying, is anybody going to care? And now it's got to be one of the most popular.
Absolutely. Oh, there was, if you remember, I can remember taking the floor at town meeting back when we had it up at Davern Auditorium, and there was opposition to the trail, and we had to fight it, and we did. And you're right, it's a major community resource now, maybe the biggest in Milford.
I think so. It seems to be one of the most popular topics, and you don't really get a lot of people speaking against it.
We did in the beginning.
In the beginning,
it
when
was
we
tough.
had to come up
it was
with
a battle.
money.
Yeah, so if you remember, and I was one of the original members of that committee back in 1997, and I can remember vividly taking the floor and arguing against the opposition to the bike trail.
And then the segments. That's what stuck in my mind the most when we had the first part of the trail done.
Yep.
and then the trail committee comes back for a little bit of money to go another mile.
Yep.
And the wars that went on, it's like, seriously.
Right, I know. But Milford, I got to say, Milford really did that project well because it was a federal transportation project. So that means the federal government paid 80% of that, the town paid 10%, and the state paid 10%. And a lot of the town's 10 contribution was in kind through the services of town engineer, town planner, and that sort of thing. Other communities have not been following that mode, and they're struggling to get their trails up and running. Milford is so far ahead of the curve than other communities on that.
Well, when you look overall, you start hearing the profanity start rising again about Prop 2.5s and debt exclusions of towns around us. Luckily, we haven't heard any profanity in Town Hall in Milford this year.
Not that kind of profanity. There might be other kind of profanity. But yeah.
But, overall, we've been very, very lucky. And I've said it before, I attribute it to the department heads because they really do spend the money well.
They do. And I mean, Milford, however, you cannot lose sight of the fact that you need to continue to grow, particularly commercially, where we've got the dual tax rate that puts us at a disadvantage with other communities in terms of businesses. So we still need to reach out. We need to court good business, good industry to the town. I think we have to get creative in terms of the Main Street area, look to try to build more of a mixed-use development in and around that area. So while there's no question Milford's in a great position, particularly compared to other communities, that doesn't mean that you stay still and remain stagnant. You got to continue to move forward.
We can't. We can't stop.
No.
It's like everybody talks about breathing life into downtown Milford. It's like until you have people living down there, I can't see how, restaurants and sandwich shops and all the secondary stores that need local support exist or survive. Because right now, to drive downtown is an effort. And then you got to find parking. And
Yeah, sure. Yep.
But, I remember growing up with Grant's downtown and
Yeah.
all the stores,
Dollar Saver.
Dollar Saver, all the stores that
Yeah.
you just always went in.
Yeah, Book and Platter.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, what a great place.
And the Music Nook, Ronnie Pagnini. And
Yeah. So, no, it's an interesting concept. I mean, a lot of people talk about, well, we've got to be like Marlboro. And I brought this up back when I was on the select board because the IDC at that time, the Industrial Development Commission, wanted to talk and get into these things about revitalizing Main Street and business and brought up the issue of Marlboro. So I contacted Marlboro. And of course, Marlboro has a separate, privately run 501c3 that's organized solely for economic development in that town. And I told them, I said, if you want to be like Marlboro, you've got to organize the business owners, get some volunteers, set up a 501c3 with this corporation devoted solely to economic development to bring greater resources, technical and otherwise, to business owners, key them in to different kinds of funding and development resources, talents, training. It's a major effort. And of course, it never really took off because it's a lot of work, and people need to get committed to do that kind of work.
I don't think people really understand when we put through the money to spruce up Main Street. You had people getting up on the floor saying, why are we spending taxpayer money to subsidize private businesses? I don't think a lot of people understood that these private businesses are paying a 50% premium, on their taxes already. So they were asking to get back a tiny, tiny little bit.
Yeah. And that's fine, but I mean, if that's the only focus, it's going to fail. Because, that really is just like, one small piece of a much larger puzzle.
So now, immigration is not a state issue. It's not a
Although the
local
driver's
issue.
licenses are gonna kick in, what is it, July 23rd, or I know it's upcoming in July, the law that passed to allow the undocumented to get driver's licenses.
Now, what effect do you think that's going to have?
That's a good question. I mean, the proponents have said that, it's going to promote safety so that, undocumented folks will have to go through, the driver training, the certification, the road testing with the registry, and then there'll be records of these folks in terms of, all of the records that the registry has for better identification and that type of thing. So hopefully that will be true, and we'll get safer roads out of it. I think the registry, in fact, I just had a briefing last week from the registrar in terms of their plan moving forward with the documentation that they need to require, the service hours and locations that they're going to have to accommodate what they think is going to be a fairly large increase in applications. So I think the RMV should be pretty well poised to deal with it, and we'll see. We'll see how many applications come forward. It'll be interesting to see that.
Do you think the undocumented people will sign up for the licenses?
That's a good question. There's still that reticence. There's still that level of fear, suspicion that, it's going to somehow, get them deported. I would think that the ones who work pretty consistently and pretty vigorously will do it, because I know it's a real hassle, for them to get to their jobs and so forth. Whether some of the other family members will do it, I'll be interested to see how that works out.
Yeah, I don't know what the downside of it is.
The downside is, and I voted against it because, at this point in time, I just thought that it was very difficult for the RMV to get the level of identification that they needed to properly determine who these folks are. So I think they've taken some steps in that area. I think they feel comfortable that they can do that. So that's great. Let's go forward.
That's going to be tough
put the
if somebody
program
came
out.
across the border with a knapsack to
Well,
have documents.
I mean, the experience that I have, Al, just for example, I had an estate, okay, very simple one, small bank account, mom, dad, three children, dad passed away. So we're trying to do this very small estate so that mom and the three daughters can access these funds. All four of them had the same name. They're the same name. Four, the three daughters and the wife. Now, in between the first name and the last name, there were probably about five other names.
I was going to say,
No, really. Yeah, in the middle, and those varied. But, I thought of that one case, and not that these were very nice people, and they weren't looking to do anything. But I'm saying, folks like that, how are the RMV going to distinguish between 1, 2, 3, or 4 when you've got that kind of?
but we're used to using Brian.
Yeah,
I think of a lot of the people that we know who are Portuguese. It's Maria Conceição, Maria this, Maria
yes,
that.
yeah,
It's not Maria.
yeah,
But as an American, I try and truncate it and
Yeah.
simplify it to Maria.
yeah,
But the name really is Maria Ana, Maria Conceição. It's an entire name is one.
right.
I got lucky because Portuguese tradition, you put everybody into the name you can.
Yep.
So that's why you end up with names like, Jose, Tico, de Taco, de Bico, de Micro, Smith.
Yeah.
My parents gave me the middle name of Abrantes. That was my great-grandmother,
Okay.
my grandmother,
Yep.
my mother. So I got 3 or 4 generations
Yep.
all built in, and now my daughter and my grandson
Yep.
have the same thing. So they got 5 generations with one name.
So, I guess that's the way it is. I know when the Real ID, came forward, although it's been the dates have been extended.
Pushback.
But I've dealt with a number of folks who were unable to get it for the reasons that you're talking about. The birth certificate might be one of those situations. If they do have a passport or social security card, it's a different name. To get the real ID, everything has to match, has to be a progression in the documents, and that wasn't there, and it was creating problems for a lot of people.
And it has to be perfect.
Yes.
Because when I went down to get my real ID,
Yep.
I found out that my mother, God bless her soul, laminated my social security
Oh,
card.
yeah, I don't know. That's a no-no. I don't know
Apparently,
why.
their readers can't reliably read through the laminate.
Okay.
At least that was the reason they gave me.
Yeah, yeah,
So I had to go to Woonsocket
yeah,
and get a new
yeah,
social security card
Yeah.
that was untouched.
yeah, yeah.
So I can see, if somebody who's grown up here has these issues.
And if you see in the pay, I don't know that anybody does. I mean, I've got an issue. I actually look at the legal notices in the paper, and you'll notice there's been a lot more name change petitions, and that's pretty much the reason. They've got to go to court to get it cleaned up in terms of what the name needs to be to match up to these different things to be able to get their license.
Now, what kind of effect, I used to get all over our superintendent about the fact that we were adding one child per year on average to the Milford High School. And all of a sudden, we got 200 coming in. How do you deal with that on a state level?
Well, we increased the per pupil allowance. We increased a lot of funding for schools that are facing that, which is one of the reasons
Thank God
why.
for Milford.
Exactly. Milford fit right into the criteria for that Student Opportunity Act. So, that's the way we can deal with it at the state. Locally, when I talk to Kevin McIntyre and some of the school committee members, they seem to be able to absorb it. But as the major issue we're looking at is what to do with Milford High School. And they've got to get out of the batter's box and get the SBA approval to go forward with that project. So that's the huge issue that's facing our town.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. People can debate it all they want, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to renovate the high school.
Oh, I think so. I think so. And the school, I think, was built that way to accommodate renovation, both in kind of the sections that it was done. I think that you can build up on those cement
couple of
frames
them.
if you have to. So yeah, I think you're
Plus,
absolutely
it's a
right.
bunker. The thing has been built to last forever.
Right.
And,
Right.
I keep hearing people say, well, maybe we should build a new high school.
Okay.
And I sit there and say, okay, new high school, $350 million. Or
Oh, at least.
oh, my God.
At
Now,
least.
I start breaking that down to $80 per million. Even with a renovation, say 175, our part of it is going to add $700 a year to the tax rate. Now, we'll do some moving around from stabilization to minimize that a bit, but still pretty substantial.
And, the big question with that perspective is, okay, great. Where?
Oh, I don't think that's a question. The only dirt we own, in my mind, that's big enough is Asylum Street.
Yeah, so.
And I cannot imagine putting a high school on Asylum Street.
Well, that's a large area of wetlands up there too, so, you wonder how much of that is buildable or not. But, beyond that, the location is at, really,
Well, think about the
wanna
traffic
do.
that would come through the university streets,
Yeah.
the
yeah.
high school kids, and even the buses through that major Route 140 highway.
Yeah.
I would feel, I don't know how I'd talk to somebody who lives down the Medway side of Milford,
Right.
telling them you got to leave on Monday to show up Tuesday for class.
I know. Yeah.
So
So that to me is not practical,
no, my gut feeling is we'll build a new wing, which will give us the growth. When that's done, move the A wing into there,
Absolutely, sure.
then do A wing over, move B wing.
Yeah.
Hopefully somewhere in the middle we build a field house,
Yeah, sure. Right.
because our kids deserve.
Yeah.
When I go to places like Shrewsbury and I see what they built for their kids,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, Shrewsbury, they got in way back when on that round of school funding. They got a huge reimbursement on that. They jumped early on their high school renovation and took full advantage of what the state could offer. This was a long time ago, back when my kids and your kids were in
Yeah,
high school.
This was before Newton North broke the bank.
Exactly. That changed the whole landscape.
And the biggest thing for me is when you look at the new rules,
Mm.
from a square footage point of view, we're way over what they'll allow per kid. And Milford is about one of the few that I believe that's growing in population of school kids.
Sure. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
the SBA won't let us, my understanding, won't let us project into the future. They have their formulas and you have to fit into them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if the school department has gotten to that point, you know. They've got to get the preliminary approval to start the feasibility study and then take it from there. So
Well,
hopefully this year they'll get that approval.
We put away 1.5 million
Yep.
into the, not the main stabilization account, but the short-term, long-term, any term stabilization account.
Yeah.
And we said, we want to be ready so that if the SBA comes in and says, you're on the list if you can get the town to fund it. Well, you know, it's always been easier if you go to town meeting and say, this is what we want to do. We already have the money put aside.
Right. Right.
You know, so the 1.5 million for a feasibility study is already, you can't say earmarked, but it's there and we
Sure.
know why we put it there.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Yep.
But, you know, the thing that people keep forgetting is we have 5 major schools.
Yep.
Each school goes 40 to 50 years before it either needs rebuilt or renovated. So is a school coming every 8 to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only problem is of the fleet, this is the aircraft carrier.
Right. Right.
Of all the
Right.
ships in the fleet, this is the one that's going to hurt the most.
This is the big daddy. It is.
But on the other hand, it's our one chance in a generation. I mean, you think about 74 when they opened up the high school.
Yep.
Compared to the old, what was it now, the Raftery Wing?
Yeah.
Compared to what we had down there,
Yep.
this was heaven.
Yep. Oh, major. It was major
So-
improvement. And you know, both you and I, we're old enough to still call it the new high school and the old high school.
Isn't that the truth?
You know, so my class was the first one to go all 4 years there.
You had the whole term. We were the first class graduated.
Okay.
But 74, we went in December.
Okay.
So we only got half a year.
Yeah.
You were 75?
I was class of 77.
77.
So I went in 73 when it opened, and all 4 years.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
we-
I
we-
see what you're saying.
So we were the class. We were the
You
first
did the
class to go all
first
4
4
years.
years.
Yeah.
And
it-
we were first class out, but we were only in it for 6 months.
Yeah. Well, if you remember, it was very hectic back then. Nobody knew anything. The poor teachers, they didn't know what was going on. They had the crazy schedule system with mods. Every 13 minutes, some kind of bell went off or something. It was
It was
crazy.
the craziest thing because I don't know how it ever happened, but my dog went to school every day.
Your dog went to school. Yeah.
My dog, he got a report card.
Yeah. Okay.
They actually gave Tuggy a report card for perfect attendance. He would walk in.
Question is whether or not you got the same.
No, well, it was kind of hard. You couldn't skip when your dog shows up to class
Yeah. Yeah.
before you, and if you're not there, but Uncle Paul Raftery used to take care of it.
Yeah.
But it was wild when we moved to the new high school.
Yeah.
Poor dog was totally confused because, like you said, all of a sudden there's bells and there's changes, and
Yeah. Yeah.
but overall, it seems like, you know, thank God you guys came through from the state.
Yeah.
Because 2 years ago, when the school committee came to us and said we need $6 million incremental dollars, it was like gulp. I'd love to help you, but where the heck are we going to get $6 million above?
Yeah.
And the state came through with 7,
Yeah. Yeah.
and last year was again 7.
Yep.
So that's been
So
saving
it's all
us.
part of the revamped formula, which again, the criteria at Milford, you know, fits that formula to a T. You know, high SPED population, high English language learner population, high, low-income population. Those are the three main factors, and we hit on all three. So,
Yeah, I mean,
and I got to say, I went up to speak to a couple of the government classes. Oh, it must have been a few weeks now. I can't remember. Mr. Liberto asked me to go up and talk to a couple of his classes. And, I do that a few times, throughout the district or whatever, whenever they ask. And I got to tell you, I was very impressed with those kids from Milford High School. The scope of the questions they asked, the awareness of the issues that are out there, I was extremely surprised about. And they weren't being prompted, and they didn't, get this info from their teacher. I was very impressed with this core group of students that I got a chance to speak with. So it was very heartening to see, so many students in our school doing so well.
You experienced it. I mean, Jack got to go where he wanted.
Yeah,
Your daughters got to go where they wanted. My two daughters got to go where they wanted. So to me, I mean, Kevin McIntyre can talk about how good the school is. He's jaundiced. He's got self-interest there.
yep.
But the colleges around us, when they accept our kids, and when our kids do well coming out of there,
Right.
that to me says we're doing okay.
Yeah.
And I can see people when they look at the MCAS scores, and they say Milford is lower than a lot of the towns around us. But if you look deep, you got that bimodal distribution.
Yeah.
Our top kids do as well as any town around here.
Oh, absolutely.
But let's face it, Brian, if they took us and said, okay, we're going to test you in a year and a half in Mandarin. You got a year and a half to learn the material and learn the language. I don't think I'd do very well.
No, it's right. It's a dynamic that a lot of other districts don't have. That deal with stresses that Milford has that other towns don't. So it's a lot of challenges.
But like I say, on the other hand, the colleges to me, if our kids were getting into Pocono Community College and that was it,
Yeah.
then I could say, we got a real problem.
Right.
But when I look at the schools that our kids got into, if they didn't get to a school, it's because they didn't apply.
Yep. Sure. Absolutely.
Now, we're hearing a lot about the state dealing with the immigrant population, having to house them.
Yeah, so that's something that, Governor Baker had tried to initiate, I want to say last year, in terms of setting up emergency shelters, because you've got refugees coming, not only from South America, Brazil, Ecuador, Guatemala, but also obviously the Ukraine, Afghanistan, the Middle East, Syria. So there are folks coming here from all over, and Massachusetts is, I think, the only state in the union that there's a constitutional right to shelter. So Governor Baker was looking to propose a number of different hotels around the area for emergency shelters, and I think that program was just kind of getting off the ground. He needed extra funding for it. That didn't happen. Fast forward, Governor Healy comes on. She takes a look at the situation. She agrees in part and files a supplemental request for funding, which was less than what Baker was looking for, and that was approved. So I think what the administration is doing now is trying to finalize locations, work lease deals with a lot of these hotels to see what they can set up for some of these folks that are coming here from other countries. And Milford was looking to have one, and I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel. I don't know if it was the Fairfield or one of the hotels right off of Fortune Boulevard as you drive
One
up.
of the 7.
Off to the right, yeah. And, we went back and forth with them because we certainly had some questions as to, how that was going to work out. And then it just stopped. So it's unclear to us whether or not that one is still on the list or if they're looking to do things other places. But you know, the immigration issue you can see all throughout the country is a huge issue. The federal government absolutely refuses or is unable to come up with a cogent immigration policy for this country. So subsequently, states and local municipalities are dealing with the aftermath. So one of the ways that we're dealing with in the state, like we talked about, is the undocumented driver's license program. So, you know, while you want the federal government to come forward with something meaningful, something comprehensive, something that makes sense about folks coming into this country and assimilating, that's not going to happen. So we need to deal with it locally and at the state level, and I think that's what we're trying to do, both at the state and in Milford, as you know.
But that's a different attitude than I hear. Because I heard New York City, we're sanctuary city, come one, come all. You know, all around the country, all these cities saying, come one. The minute they started getting a percentage or a group of immigrants, they start screaming that they can't handle them. I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, and I don't really know exactly the dynamic that New York is facing, but I think what you have is just kind of a lack of any type of coherent plan to assimilate these folks into the economy and into the community. What you have is political grandstanding from the governor of Texas, the governor of Florida, and they just haphazardly get these individuals and, you know, transport them to Vice President Harris's house or, you know, the governor of New York's house. So I think that's despicable because they're using these people as political pawns. These are human beings, you know, and they're just using them as their own political weapons to do these things. And you're right, when that comes upon a community without any kind of plan or any kind of notice, it is chaotic. And unfortunately, the federal government has left us in that position for the lack of any type of coherent immigration policy.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I mean, putting immigrants on buses and sending them to where nobody's ready for them sounds silly.
Or even knows that they're coming. And it's just political grandstanding. That's all it is. It doesn't want to solve anything. It doesn't want to put pressure on Congress to act. It gets them on Fox News and rah rah rah, and they're you know fighting for the good old America, which you know is questionable. And it's really counterproductive. It really is.
But aren't we doing the same thing by leaving them if we left them all in Texas?
Absolutely.
I mean, to me, both sides, I don't see a clean play on either the Democrats or the Republicans.
Absolutely. There's, you know, that's not a solution either, you know, to let them come over and stay there. What you've got to do is focus on, you know, the different areas. You've got to reach out to these countries, number one, and try to build some bridges or do what's got to be done to try to reduce the flow. But number two, you've got to come up with a process that makes sense for folks to come in here on a organized basis for the right kinds of reasons and necessities, and you know try to get them into areas where they can be helpful and put them on a path to citizenship sooner rather than later, and something that's manageable and maintainable.
See, I could see saying you're going to get your percentage. If they're coming, deal with it. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Because you can't just say we're going to divvy it up 1/48th, because Rhode Island can't absorb as many as California.
Yeah, right, sure, yeah.
But to sit there and say we're going to put all the burden on one part of the country doesn't make any sense to me either. I mean, I'd like to see the pressure put on to say, you know, realistically, if it's an immigrant community and you come in, assimilate, you put your head down, you work hard, okay, that's what this country was built on.
Well, I mean, you know, businesses are just crying out for workers. So, for example, you know, Frank Romano, owner of Blair House in Milford, has a tremendous problem trying to get workers, and he's gone to the Philippines to try to recruit over 1,000 nurses and other personnel from the Philippines to come here because he can't get anybody to work here. And he's worked with Congressman Richie Neal, to try to facilitate that. And it's very, very difficult.
Richie's taking time out of Ways and Means.
Yes. He's been helping Frank on that. But I mean, that's just one segment. So, whether it's the construction industry, the human service industry, there are tremendous employment opportunities.
It's hard not to remember that my grandfather came to Milford with $32.80 in his pocket, put his head down, and went to work in the shoe factories, and lived minimally so he could send money back to his daughters and wife.
Yeah.
I have a hard time saying that's not the kind of person we want to help build our Milford.
Right.
Now, somebody comes over and starts dealing drugs or committing crimes, what compassion I have just went out the door.
Right. Yeah, sure. That's
But-
a whole different discussion.
In a way, you and I have never had to face not being able to feed. Jack's never come to you and said, "Dad, I'm hungry," and you said, "I can't afford to buy a sandwich." So a lot of these people, I can't say I understand where they're coming from, because I've been blessed that I've been able to feed my family. I haven't worried about armed marauders outside the door. So helping them just seems like the right thing to do. But like you say, doing it in an organized way.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what needs to be done. But, obviously the federal government is paralyzed. So now you drop it into the states and the municipalities, to deal with it on kind of a catch-can, basis. And that's I think a big reason why we're seeing all the confusion that we are.
And don't get me wrong, I know you're a powerful man in Boston.
I don't
But-
think so.
You can't deport somebody to Rhode Island.
No.
You know what I mean? If somebody's breaking our laws,
Yeah.
it's still a federal issue. We can't just say, okay, we're going to send you to New Hampshire.
Right.
So we got to come up with a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
You've been involved in a bill to help our seniors.
Yeah, which one? I probably, I don't know. I testified on a bill today that I filed to require the senior care organizations, which, siphon down insurance, Mass Health regulated, but, they're not meeting the requirements for the increased rates for specialized services that nursing homes provide, and they put nursing homes at a further disadvantage, such as, Countryside and all of the privately run nursing homes. So I filed this on behalf of one of our local nursing homes, which it's endemic across the state, and I testified on that today before the Joint Committee on Elder Affairs, and got a very favorable reception. So, I think that this bill is gonna progress. Again, it's just another piece in the puzzle to try to help nursing homes meet what is an ever-increasing burden of lack of resources, lack of workers, and Mass Health rates that just don't meet their escalating, increasing costs of operation.
Well, we can see it because the directors at Countryside are doing heroic things to try and keep the level. But yet, when you start saying you're losing $50, $70 a day on Medicaid patients or Mass Health, how long can you keep going?
That's it. So it's systemic. And, one of the things that the speaker has indicated that we're going to be passing this session, and hopefully soon, is a major nursing home reform bill. And I think, because Joint Committee on Elder Affairs has been very active the last few weeks, last month or so. So I think what they're doing is gathering up all of these different bills and to see what kind of makes sense in like an omnibus type of bill to really kind of do over what we see in the nursing home industry.
Yeah, 'cause I get worried. I mean, when my mom had her knees done,
Yep.
she got rehab for, it was either a week and a half or 2 weeks. Now I'm seeing the paradigm shift to where they want to do it almost day surgery.
Right. Right.
And the nursing homes were counting on the rehab people paying, the $600 a day
Yep.
to make up for the people that were paying $200 some a day.
Yep.
That we were losing money on.
Yep.
So I get worried because, we're fortunate that we have a high quality nursing home here with Countryside. And I loved it when my mom suffered dementia and she was a mile away from me.
Right. Right.
But at the other hand, how long can the town bear the burden by itself?
And the town shouldn't. I mean, the Geriatric Authority is a separate, as you know, organization, quasi-state run. There's only 2 of them in the state that exist still. So it's really independent of the town, although it works hand in hand with the town. But, what's happening at Countryside is happening at the privately run nursing homes as well. And, the Salmon family, they got out of the nursing home business. So, it's a huge issue. I don't think any of us want to see the nursing home industry go away. It's just too valuable to folks that need the care. So we need to figure out how we can make it work sensibly, economically, and still be there to provide the care that folks need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how it can go away.
I don't know what the alternative is.
I
I
was
mean,
gonna say-
obviously, home care is available, but that's not there for everybody.
Yeah, but home care, I mean, my mom lived with us for 31 years. But at the end with the dementia,
Yeah,
somebody had to keep their eyes on her 24/7
right.
because she
Right.
just would wander off
Yeah,
or
Yeah.
fall downstairs if we weren't, watching every
yeah,
second.
yeah,
It just wasn't practical
right,
because we didn't have anybody else at home
right,
to take care of her.
exactly.
So,
Yeah,
well, thank you as always for giving us a glimpse.
yeah.
And more, I won't say more importantly, but just importantly, thank you for all the extra money you bring in.
Well, we try to, yeah. We got the money for the youth center too, so we can pass over that article at town meeting.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of people forget that those little bits, 100,000 here, 100,000. What was the OMB guy that said $1 billion here, $1 billion there pretty soon?
It's a heck of real money.
Real
Yeah.
money? Well,
Yeah.
for Milford, that 50,000 or 100,000 is real money.
And I got money to, Chief Nelson was happy, I got money to replace all of his fire hose.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, yeah, so I put those 2 in for Milford and got that, and as a soccer fan, you'll be glad to know that I got $100,000 to do over the soccer field over at Hopedale.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Well, thank you, and keep doing what you're doing.
we will try, keep plugging away.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for joining. Representative Murray is very accessible, so if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to him in his office. And as always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Good night.
Far too long since I've been home.